They may have assumed that I killed a lot of people, but like I said, I didn't kill nobody. You know what I mean?
Everybody called him Marlo Stanfield, but according to his own account, that wasn't the whole story. His real name was Marlo Bates. The Stanfield name came from his twin brother. Same mother, different fathers. And from the age of 9, Marlo carried the Stanfield name with him. Decades later, millions of people would hear that same name when HBO introduced one of the most feared characters in television history, Marlo Stanfield. But the man who inspired pieces of that character was not a fictional gangster. He was a real man from Baltimore who spent decades behind bars. His story involved drugs, violence, murder cases, twin brothers, questionable evidence, prison, and eventually a completely different life. And somewhere along the way, his name became part of television history. The Block Docs presents The Real Marlo from The Wire. Marlo and his twin brother Timur grew up in West Baltimore. Later, the family moved to Westport on the city's south side. Their mother was described as kind, but she was also strict. She didn't tolerate nonsense, and she taught her sons how to fight. Young Marlo could even sell marijuana from the family home, but there was one line he wasn't allowed to cross. Hard drugs were forbidden under his mother's roof. That distinction would not last forever, because Marlo was growing up in a city where the drug trade was becoming increasingly powerful. And by the time he was a teenager, he was ready to step into that world. According to Marlo's account, he jumped off the porch at around 13 years old. It was roughly 1974. He started with marijuana, but there was another battle he was fighting. Marlo couldn't read. That inability followed him everywhere. His family teased him about it. Other people could have used it against him. But Marlo learned something early. You didn't have to announce that you were tough. You simply had to be tough. He hated bullies. He hated stick-up boys. And he believed he was going to become a millionaire. That ambition became one of the defining characteristics of his life. He also developed another principle. Trust was everything. He wanted people around him who could be relied upon. If they couldn't be trusted, they had no place around him. Marlo and Timur were different. Timur handled more of the business side. Marlo was the muscle. Together, they became a powerful combination. Eventually, they came under a major dealer named Peter Dixon. Dixon controlled drug spots in places including Lexington Terrace and the high-rises. According to Marlo's account, the operation moved enormous quantities of heroin. The streets were busy around the clock. People lined up to buy. Bags could sell for $70 or $80. Half bags went for around $35. This wasn't a small neighborhood operation. It was a business. And Marlo was learning how it worked. When Peter Dixon died, the twins stepped into their own operation. The brothers expanded their reach. According to Marlo's account, the organization obtained product connected to Africa, although he never went into detail about the precise route. The organization eventually controlled territory across multiple Baltimore communities: Murphy Homes, Lexington Terrace, Westport, and beyond. The operation allegedly functioned around the clock. Different quantities, different prices, different customers. But the product remained largely the same: heroin and powdered cocaine. There was one major exception: they didn't sell crack. Timur wouldn't allow it. Marlo agreed. It was one of the rules of their organization. The twins believed loyalty was everything. Their philosophy was simple: treat people the way you want to be treated. If you treated people properly, they stayed loyal. Break the code, and you stood alone. It was a philosophy that sounds remarkably familiar to viewers of The Wire, because one of the show's recurring themes is that the street has its own rules. A code, a hierarchy, a form of loyalty. But reality was much less romantic. The code did not prevent violence. It did not prevent betrayal. And eventually, it attracted the attention of law enforcement. According to accounts of the organization, police knew money was moving. They knew drugs were moving. And they knew violence surrounded the operation. As Marlo's name became more widely known, so did his reputation. But the version of Marlo remembered by investigators was far darker than the image he described of himself. According to investigators who pursued the Stanfield organization, Marlo was a ruthless and dangerous man, someone they believed was capable of extraordinary violence and would go to great lengths to reach his targets. They described a predator, a man who understood that his reputation alone could make enemies vulnerable. And investigators claimed he could be remarkably patient when settling a score. One of the most disturbing stories associated with Marlo came from investigators who claimed that he would sometimes disguise himself as a woman to get close to his intended victims. According to their view of the case, you might not even realize Marlo was coming until he was already there. Remind you of somebody? And as the murders and investigations surrounding the organization continued, police became increasingly determined to stop him. Because to the detectives working those cases, Marlo Stanfield was no longer just another name in Baltimore's drug trade. They believed they were hunting one of the most ruthless men on the streets. Two men would eventually become deeply familiar with the Baltimore drug world: Ed Burns and David Simon. Burns was a Baltimore homicide detective. Simon was a crime reporter for the Baltimore Sun. Both spent years studying the city's criminal underworld. The Stanfield organization became part of that world. From the late 1970s into the mid-1980s, murders accumulated. Cases were opened. Charges were filed. Some cases disappeared. Others remained alive as what were sometimes referred to as stat cases, meaning they could potentially be revived. Investigators continued working, and witnesses became increasingly important. One of the most remarkable stories surrounding the case involved Marlo's brother, Tony "Cat Eyes" Stanfield. According to the account, prosecutors offered Cat Eyes a deal. Name Marlo in connection with a double homicide at a party, and he could walk. Cat Eyes refused. He reportedly spent approximately 40 years in prison. The story illustrates the enormous pressure surrounding the investigation. Authorities needed witnesses. The organization had people who knew what happened. But getting those people to testify was another matter. And eventually, investigators found other ways to build their cases. One of the most controversial elements of this story involves forensic testimony. A state forensic expert named Joseph Capira was involved in cases connected to the prosecution. Years later, Capira became the subject of serious controversy concerning his credentials and forensic work. The allegations surrounding his work raised questions about evidence used in numerous criminal cases. According to accounts of the story, the consequences reached far beyond Marlo's case. Capira's work had potentially affected thousands of defendants. He later died by suicide. The controversy became part of the complicated legacy surrounding the prosecutions of Baltimore's drug organizations. And for Marlo, the evidence used against him would eventually become one of the defining issues of his case. Marlo survived several cases before the one that finally put him away. One case reportedly involved a shooting and witnesses who claimed Marlo had committed the crime. But a cab driver and a woman at a gas station reportedly placed him somewhere else, throwing a monkey wrench at the prosecution's case. Then another problem emerged. Marlo and his twin looked almost identical. That similarity became important when prosecutors were already pursuing a conspiracy case involving Tamira and others. Marlo was reportedly in federal custody over a gun-related ammunition case when authorities brought him into open court. Old fingerprints and other evidence were introduced as part of the effort to connect him to the broader case. And suddenly, The twin who wasn't originally at the center of the prosecution found himself pulled into it. The twins had lawyers who had represented members of the organization for years, but pressure was mounting. According to the account, authorities threatened the lawyers with tax and other charges if they continued representing the organization. The lawyers eventually walked away. The situation became so overwhelming that some reportedly broke down in the bullpen. Marlo looked at his twin, and according to his account, the message was clear. They were done. The legal defense that had protected the organization for years was collapsing, and the brothers were running out of options. In 1984, Marlo was convicted in a double homicide case. The prosecution relied on forensic testimony and other contested evidence. The sentence was devastating. Double life plus 20 years. His twin Timur received double life plus 45 years. Cat Eyes was already buried in the prison system. Marlo was in his 30s. The street life was over. The prison doors closed, and he wouldn't see freedom again for decades. Marlo entered prison, expecting to spend the rest of his life there, but something changed. At 26 years old, he learned how to read. The same inability that had followed him since childhood was finally confronted. But prison eventually became something different for Marlo. He began breaking up fights. He helped younger inmates leave gangs. He intervened in violence. He stopped assaults. He became involved in keeping order rather than creating chaos. The transformation wasn't instant, but over decades, something happened. The man who had once helped run a violent drug organization became a completely different person. Marlo appeared before the parole board only a handful of times. His institutional record was reportedly excellent. He had spent decades behind bars without accumulating, the kind of disciplinary record that might have kept him imprisoned indefinitely. And then came 2022. After roughly 37 years, Maryland released him. A man who had entered prison as a young adult walked out as an older man. The city he remembered was gone, but it wasn't entirely gone. Baltimore had changed. Gentrification had transformed neighborhoods. People had been pushed out. Then, in some places, the inner city suddenly became desirable again. The streets had changed. The drug trade had changed. Technology had changed. But some things remained. The importance of loyalty, the consequences of violence, and the memories of the old Baltimore.
36 years I did. My other brother did 39 and the other one did 40.
Marlo didn't come home preaching about the glory days. Quite the opposite. He tells young people that the life isn't worth it because he knows exactly what it costs. Not 5 years, not 10, a lifetime. After prison, Marlo began writing books, songs, plays, even greeting cards. The man who couldn't read as a child became a writer, and he wanted other children to have opportunities he never had. He and others began working toward what became known as the Stanfield Initiative. The goal was to put tools in children's hands. Education, opportunity, alternatives, the things that might have changed the trajectory of his own life. It was an attempt to turn decades of experience into something useful. And then there was television. David Simon had spent years inside Baltimore's criminal justice system as a reporter. Ed Burns had spent years as a detective. Together, their experiences became the foundation for The Wire. And eventually, viewers met Marlo Stanfield, played by Jamie Hector. Cold, quiet, calculating, obsessed with reputation. A man who would kill to protect his name. To audiences, Marlo Stanfield was fictional. But the name wasn't completely fictional, and neither was the world around him. Perhaps the strangest part of the story is that Marlo reportedly never watched The Wire all the way through. During his years in prison, Screenings of the show would reportedly result in him being transferred or removed because of the security concerns surrounding his reputation. So while millions of people watched Marlo Stanfield become one of television's most famous drug kingpins, the man whose name helped inspire the character wasn't sitting there watching it. He didn't create the character. He wasn't asked to participate. And according to his account, he wasn't paid for the use of his name or the pieces of his reputation that became part of the fictional world. There's an important difference between the man and the character. The Marlo Stanfield of The Wire is still consumed by power at the end. He cannot completely walk away. His identity is tied to his reputation. The real Marlo Stanfield came home after 37 years and chose something else: writing, community work, helping young people, trying to make sense of a past that cannot be changed. He doesn't present the old life as glamorous. He knows what it cost. And perhaps that is the biggest difference of all. A man who spent his childhood unable to read eventually became a writer. A man who once lived by the rules of the street eventually spent years trying to keep younger men from making the same mistakes. And a man who once thought becoming powerful was everything eventually learned that power means very little when you're sitting in a cell watching your life pass without you. Thanks for watching. Let me ask you a question. After losing 37 years of his life, do you think Marlo truly found redemption? Or can some choices never be undone, no matter how much a person changes? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Oh yeah, I almost forgot.
Hey yo, get off the block.